Right before the super typhoon struck, my parents expelled me from their home. They claimed it was out of concern that there wouldn't be sufficient food, and my presence would mean more mouths to feed, potentially leaving my brother, his wife, and their children hungry. The typhoon tore me away, and I was fatally injured on the street before I could even collect my multi-million-dollar lottery prize. When I regained consciousness, I found myself 5 hours before the typhoon was set to hit. To avoid being kicked out again, I volunteered to leave the house. My parents commended me for my rationality, my brother and sister-in-law regarded me as clever, and my nephews mocked me as naive. Unbeknownst to them, their house would be obliterated by the typhoon. Upon waking once more, I was safe in my usual single bed, free from the intense pain. Understanding that I had been granted another chance, I quickly examined my backpack. Thankfully, my concealed lottery ticket was still intact. Holding it close, tears of happiness streamed down my face as memories from my previous life resurfaced. In that past life, the weather forecast had predicted the super typhoon would hit our town around 7 p.m. One afternoon, my parents abruptly requested that I undertake a 4-hour car journey to the countryside to care for my grandparents. Given the unpredictability of typhoons, such a trip was highly risky. I declined and insisted on knowing the real reason. My mother hesitantly confessed that she and my father feared a food shortage at home due to the typhoon disrupting supply lines, worrying that my brother's family might go hungry. It was hard to grasp, especially since just the night before, after my mother had urgently called for supplies, I had risen early to purchase ample vegetables, meat, and fruit in the city. I then spent over 2 hours on a bus delivering these goods to them. Everyone was joyous upon receiving the supplies, only to later claim there wasn't enough and demanded that I leave. Despite my pleas and assurances that I would only consume water and not the food, they forced me out when I wasn't looking and shut the door in my face. I screamed and pounded on the door until my hands ached and my voice was hoarse, but no one answered. All I heard was my father's voice saying, "Life and death are fated blessings, and misfortunes are in heaven's hands." They knew that with the typhoon blocking transportation, I would have to survive on my own. Dying once made me realize that this family was filled with ungrateful individuals who didn't deserve my genuine care. Later, amidst fierce winds and rain, I was hurled into the air, smashed against a coconut tree, and met a brutal end. After my death, I floated above and witnessed their self-built house crumble into debris during the typhoon. Seeing this allowed me to finally find peace. The saying, "What goes around comes around," resonated deeply with me. Noticing the time, I realized there were just under 5 hours before the typhoon would strike again. Determined to leave this perilous home immediately, even if they hadn't expelled me, I knew I couldn't stay for their sake. I gathered my lottery ticket, Idaho, bank cards, a few clothes, and prepared to leave. "Hey Dad, Mom, brother, and everyone else, I'm going out for a while," I announced. The room fell silent at my sudden declaration. Pretending not to overhear their plans to expel me again, my mother asked, "Emma, you're waking up from your nap so early. Didn't you stay up late last night? With the typhoon coming tonight, you're leaving now?" I responded with a smile. "Didn't Grandma and Grandpa mention they weren't feeling well in the group chat yesterday? Since the typhoon is approaching, I plan to stay in the countryside for a few days to take care of them." This statement eased everyone's tension. My typically skeptical sister-in-law still questioned, "Aren't you worried about the typhoon on your way?" My eldest nephew Noah, who was engrossed in his game, mumbled, "Idiot," without looking up. As usual, no one addressed his rudeness. I acted indifferent and explained, "No, it's still early. With so many people at home, I'm concerned about potential shortages of food and water during the typhoon, and you can't buy anything now. It's better I stay with Grandma and Grandpa since there are fewer of them. This way, there will be more for everyone else." Their expressions softened. My mother even held my hand and smiled, saying, "Emma, you're really thoughtful." My father took a drag from his cigarette and nodded. "You've been raised well. You showed some sense today." Only my second sister-in-law scoffed, saying to her husband, "She's just an outsider. Good, she knows her place." I ignored her and turned to my brother. "Hey, can I borrow your van? There won't be any buses now." My sister-in-law's expression darkened immediately, so I quickly added, "Oh, I heard Uncle's orchard had a great harvest, and the pigs are almost ready for market. I just received my bonus, so I'll bring back some extra fruit and fresh meat." Hearing this, my sister-in-law's demeanor brightened, and my brother handed me the keys with a smile. If you need the van, no problem. Just fill it up with meat. Don't worry too much about the fruit." Promising to do so, I grabbed the dog carrier as I passed the stairs. Noah finally looked up from his game and yelled, "Stop! Don't take that dumb dog, Lucas!" My second nephew rushed over, trying to shove me into taking the dog carrier. "It's our dog's slave. If you take it, I'll tell Grandpa to beat you." The fourth nephew, usually glued to his phone, glanced up too. "Yeah, Emma, leave, buddy. When the typhoon hits, we can have a dog meat feast." Hearing them, Buddy whimpered, pawing at his crate. A chill ran down my spine, but I maintained my composure. You all didn't want to pay for Buddy's shots, and if you eat him, you might catch rabies. Besides, keeping a dog during the typhoon is extra trouble. I'd rather take him to Grandma and Grandpa's to guard the house. This time, my second sister-in-law even agreed. "Yeah, take that smelly dog. I think Lucas might be getting fleas from him." She held Lucas back and signaled for me to leave quickly with the dog. Noah tried to grab the dog again, but my mother and sister-in-law restrained him. The sister-in-law scolded. "Same rotten dog. Don't you worry about getting sick from him." My mom complained. "Emma, if you take the dog out, don't bring him back. Too many germs." Amidst the chaos, I hurried out the door with Buddy. As I left, Lucas yelled, "Fool, you'll get blown away along with that dead dog." That brat nearly made me lose my temper. But then I glanced back at our house, and somehow all my anger vanished. I even gave Lucas a meaningful smile, hoping that when the typhoon hit, he would remain as foul-mouthed as he was now. Once in the car, I opened Buddy's crate and gently petted his head, reassuring him, "My Buddy isn't a sick dog. Buddy is the best little pup in the world." Buddy seemed to understand we were escaping, his eyes bright with anticipation. He was truly intuitive, probably the only one at home who genuinely cared for me. In my previous life, when I was outside begging to be let in, Buddy was the only one at home barking desperately, hoping someone would help me. Noah and Lucas, those little troublemakers, nearly killed him and even tried to set his fur on fire with a lighter. But Buddy didn't mind his burns. He jumped from the second-floor balcony, limped to me, and stayed by my side. Sadly, the typhoon was too powerful, and he was swept away and died on the street. This time, I would never abandon him. We drove off in a battered van toward the city. I wasn't planning to go to the countryside to see my grandparents. Besides the long and dangerous journey, their small house likely couldn't withstand the typhoon. My father always boasted about being the eldest grandson, yet he thrust the responsibility of caring for them onto me, his least favored granddaughter. It was a twisted take on filial piety. Like our family, I have 4 brothers, but I've never seen them be of much help. The car swiftly reached the outskirts, a few hours away. It was oppressively hot before the typhoon hit, with no wind and the sky displaying a stunning purplish-red hue. By this time, flights were canceled, and trains had ceased operation. There was no other way to flee the town. I didn't return to the teacher's dorm at school. Instead, I found a 5-star hotel that allowed pets, swiped my credit card, and booked a room for a week. The hotel was reputed to be resilient enough to withstand major disasters and had received numerous global accolades. Additionally, its location near the mountains and away from the sea made it one of the safest spots in the city. I specifically requested a suite on a lower floor for added safety, as no one understands the typhoons might better than I do. After checking in, I spent a fortune hiring a runner to purchase enough food, potable water, and supplies for Buddy and me to last several days. Once the typhoon passed, I could cash in my lottery winnings, making these expenses negligible. After preparing everything, I took a nice bath and gave Buddy one too. Then, I filled a bathtub with water as a backup and fully charged 10 power banks. Looking out the window, the typhoon was approaching, with winds starting to bend branches and all sorts of light debris floating in the air. Distant dark clouds rolled in against a surreal backdrop of radiant twilight, hinting at massive destructive power. There weren't many people or cars outside anymore. Sensible individuals had already returned home to brace for the storm. I cuddled Buddy, charged my phone, and played games. Strangely, despite the impending typhoon, I felt the most peaceful I had in a long time. Living in a family like mine had been suffocating. Although my mother always tried to convince me that our family wasn't sexist, claiming she could have aborted me since there were already 4 boys, I discovered the truth when my father got drunk and revealed that my birth was accidental. The fortune teller had predicted he would have 5 sons and would hit the jackpot. But several incorrect ultrasound results led to me. He told me I would owe the William family a son forever. It was absurd. My entire life felt like a joke. I realized I hadn't stood up for myself even when mistreated. I had merely visited homeless and distanced myself from the family without completely cutting ties. It was laughable that during a typhoon, the people I cared about pushed me out without a second thought. Now, with a second chance, it struck me. If they don't appreciate me, I won't bother. Lost in these thoughts, I fell asleep on the couch without realizing it. I was abruptly awakened by a sudden phone call. Checking the time, it was 4 p.m., and the typhoon was just an hour away from hitting them. My father's tone was harsh. "You've been out for 4 hours and still not at your grandpa's? They're waiting for you to cook. Stop dawdling." I lied. "Oh, I stopped for gas, got them some food, got delayed, almost there." My father snorted, easing up a bit. "Then eat less yourself. As a young person, prioritize elders in everything. A few scoldings shouldn't make you upset, your grandma." I chuckled coldly and agreed. After the call, I opened our home's surveillance app. My parents ran a small fishery, which wasn't exactly poor, and had built a 5-story house early on. With 4 brothers, each got a floor, and I lived with my parents on the first floor. When there were many thieves in town, my mother tricked me into paying for home surveillance. Cameras covered every accessible level on every family phone. My brothers claimed to help at the fish pond, but actually just loitered, especially enjoying playing poker. As I suspected, doing nothing, my brothers and sister-in-law were playing card games while others were gaming at another table. I exited the surveillance app and kept refreshing the news for satellite images of the typhoon, closely monitoring its path. The typhoon center was moving rapidly, making it unsurprising that the weather predictions in my previous life were off. My family never tuned into the news. They preferred playing cards or games, browsing videos, or watching trivial shows. Occasionally checking the news might have informed them that the typhoon was accelerating and growing stronger, at least giving them some survival knowledge and prompting safety precautions. However, that's no longer my concern. Since the hotel was still accepting orders, I reached out to the front desk and requested a large seafood banquet. The 5-star establishment was efficient, and within 30 minutes, a robot brought the meal to my room. Just as I was about to start eating, my phone rang again. It was my mother. While I leisurely enjoyed my meal, she urgently asked, "Emma, your grandparents said you're not home yet. Be honest with me. Did you not go? You know you don't have to lie if you don't want to go." I chewed on a piece of salmon before replying, "Mom, it's not that I didn't want to go. I just took a wrong turn earlier. I'm back on track now. Tell them I'm almost there." She seemed relieved, but then hesitated. "Since you took a wrong turn, do you want to come back home first?" "There's something happening," I responded, confused. "I'm almost there. Turning back would be too much trouble, and I might encounter the typhoon." She paused again and said, "You should return. The typhoon won't hit for another 2.5 hours, so you have time." I sighed. "Why do you need me to come back? What's so urgent?" My mom hesitated before explaining, "Your third sister-in-law isn't feeling well and wants lemon chicken from town. Can you drive and get some?" Her request both shocked and annoyed me, especially since I was eating fish at the moment. "It's her first pregnancy, and she has specific cravings," my mom continued, emphasizing the importance. Suddenly, my third brother took the call. "Sis, can you get some chicken for her since you're driving and it's just a short trip?" I responded, "Why can't you get it for your wife? It's only a 10-minute walk. Is she expecting my child?" My brother seemed irritated. "Emma, what are you saying? It's dangerous out there. What if the typhoon sweeps me away? So, I become the scapegoat?" At that point, I hung up, not wanting to spend another minute. I figured with the time he had, he might as well prepare his will instead of worrying about chicken. My brother kept calling back, but I ignored him and set my phone to Do Not Disturb. After slowly finishing my feast, I glanced at the clock. It was exactly 5 o'clock. The super typhoon should have already hit the town. I wondered about the situation there. Even from the sturdy hotel room, the fierce winds were audible outside. Looking out the window, the scene was chaotic with debris flying everywhere. I accessed our home security camera app to check on things. The house was in disarray. Through the screen, it was evident that the winds were much stronger than here. The windows were shaking violently, causing the furniture to sway. My fourth brother lived on the top floor, where the ceiling and all windows were leaking severely. Despite the chaos, my brothers and sister-in-law were still engrossed in their poker game. My dad was downstairs, sweeping water that was entering through the front door, muttering and cursing. How could Emma be so indifferent? The Typhoon is here, and she didn't even visit her grandparents or get chicken for her sister-in-law. Who knows where she went? Probably back to her city dorm to relax, my eldest sister-in-law added, watching her 2 kids in the living room instead of joining the game. Suddenly, she froze. Mom, what if something happened to Emma in the Typhoon since she's not answering her phone? My mom's expression turned worried. During a break from the poker game, everyone came over for some water and fruit. My second sister-in-law stepped in to comfort. No way, Mom, Emma's in a car. She can easily find a safe place to hide. My dad grew impatient. That stubborn girl. She's just acting out. Why would anyone want a daughter-in-law like her? My mom helped my third sister-in-law, smiling warmly at her belly and patiently explaining, I'm just worried about her being on the road. It took us over 20 years to raise her. It would be such a shame if something happened when we were about to receive a dowry. My third sister-in-law's eyes flickered as she casually added, It's no big deal, Mom. You don't always need a living person for a dowry. Recently, the buddiest man's young son passed away. They're seeking a ghost marriage and offered a 7-figure dowry. 7 grand? My eldest sister-in-law asked. My third sister-in-law smiled mysteriously. 7 figures. Everyone gasped. My second sister-in-law exchanged glances, muttering, Wow, buddy people have different rules. The dowry for a ghost marriage is even higher than for the living. Mom, if Emma really got into trouble, it'd be her good fortune. My third brother agreed. Exactly. That kind of fortune is rare. It's better than her working as a school teacher for a meager salary. Hearing this felt like a slap in the face. I couldn't believe it. I had always thought they sent me into the storm out of selfishness. If I hadn't experienced it firsthand, I couldn't have imagined such malicious intent. All the talk about scarce food was just a pretext. From the beginning, they planned to send me out, hoping to profit from my misfortune with a quick $1 million blood-stained payday. A living person wasn't as valuable as a dead one, so as a girl, I was disposable. How is that different from murder? I was both stunned and oddly relieved by my family's impending doom. Watching the cameras with a cold smile, I saw they were already planning how to spend the money. My eldest sister-in-law looked hopeful. With $1 million, we could transfer Noah and Lucas to a city school, right? My second sister-in-law nodded. Yeah, the old man always wanted to switch to an electric car. Lucas thinks the cars are too old and refuses to be seen in one. My third sister-in-law chuckled. There's a new maternity center in the city. It's fantastic and only 10 grand a month. Mom wouldn't have to help with my postnatal care anymore. My mom nodded in agreement. With the Typhoon hitting the fishing grounds, who knows how much loss there will be. At least now we'll have money for the 4th brother's wedding. At this point, I couldn't bear it any longer. I turned off the surveillance, unable to watch anymore. No matter how numb my heart had become, witnessing it was physically painful. Buddy was lying quietly at my feet, looking up at me with concern. I hugged him, trying to calm down and telling myself to hold on a little longer, that everything would soon be over. But shortly after, my phone started ringing again. It was my mom calling. This time, I answered. Her voice was urgent, not the usual cheerful tone from the surveillance. Emma, where on earth did you go? We can't find you anywhere. Can you come home for a bit? The Typhoon is coming. I'm scared to death. The power and water are out. Noah and Lucas are fussing about wanting to play with the tablet, but it's out of battery. Could you bring some power banks from outside? I have a headache. I almost laughed. Am I supposed to have some kind of immunity or superpower against typhoons? They all want me to deliver stuff in this weather. Riding on the despair I felt earlier, I adopted a desperate tone. Mom, I heard the third sister-in-law wanted chicken, so I started heading back. But I had bad luck and ran into the Typhoon. My car can't move now. Someone come rescue me. It's so scary. Everything's flying around in the wind. There was a pause on the other end. You really started heading back? There's quite a storm here. Is your car okay? For now, I'm at a shelter, but I can't hold on for long. You need to come save me. I've got several power banks. I cried out for help as if I were genuinely trapped in a storm. My second sister-in-law calmly responded, Emma, don't panic. Send your location to my phone and we'll figure out a way to pick you up. I randomly selected a highway location and sent it over. Meanwhile, I heard someone whisper in the background, With a location, it'll be easier to handle later. Otherwise, we'd have to search everywhere. How ironic. I could feel the storm's intensity over the phone. They didn't seem to care where their bodies might end up floating, but were concerned about retrieving mine. I pretended the wind hit me again and hung up. When they called back, I couldn't be bothered to answer. The signal was indeed weakening, cutting in and out. Unable to reach me by phone, they began harassing me in the family group chat. My mom was sending numerous 60-second voice messages, popping up intermittently. "Emma, the windows are shaking and the water is rising. Come back and help clean up the water." "Emma, several windows are shattered and furniture is flying out. It's terrifying. Drive back home and rescue some stuff." "Our house is practically a shell. Hurry back and help your mom." "Emma, the street has turned into a river. The first floor's water is already a meter high. I'm scared to death." "Your brother and sister-in-law moved up to the 4th floor to play cards, and we've moved to the 2nd. The house won't get submerged, will it?" "Come drive us out of here, Emma." "Come on, bring us some food at least. Noah and Lucas are hungry and want snacks, but they're all on the 1st floor, and no one's brave enough to go down there." Other relatives, seeing my mom's messages, were shocked and left comments. "Emma went out during a typhoon. Oh my god, what's wrong with the grown-ups? Letting a child run out during a typhoon? Emma's out of her mind." I quietly responded, "No worries, aunties, uncles, and cousins. Dad said he was worried about Grandma and Grandpa being alone. I was driving to take care of them." "Nonsense. You're sending Emma to her death in this weather." "Is your dad out of his mind? Why aren't your brothers taking care of the grandparents?" Maybe the criticism was too much. My parents became agitated, explaining, "Emma's a good kid. She knows I'm not well and volunteered to care for Grandma and Grandpa. Besides, when she left, the typhoon was 7 hours away. How could we know it would hit early?" "Yes, and I told her to come back quickly, but she wouldn't. She's taking shelter somewhere safer. Our house is suffering more than she is." The relatives couldn't say much more and offered some comfort. "As long as Emma's safe, that's the most important thing." "So scary, Auntie?" "Don't worry, except for the top and bottom floors, at least the 2nd and 3rd floors are safe. Just stay put and don't wander around." The sister-in-laws not playing cards also chimed in for my parents. "You all don't understand. Little Emma wasn't answering her phone or messages earlier. We were scared to death. Our parents were also worried about our elders. And Emma insisted on taking care of them. We have lots of elderly and kids. The men need to stay and hold things down at home." "Huh, the men just wanted to stay and play cards, huh? It'd be too easy if they just died like that, to keep stringing them along." I sent another message. "Don't worry, family. I found a way to avoid the typhoon and we'll be back home with supplies soon." Once that message was sent, the group went silent for a while. I guess they weren't pleased that I hadn't perished and had actually found a way back. My second sister-in-law awkwardly texted, "As long as you're okay." Through the screen, I could sense her disappointment. I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. It was quiet for a good while before my phone buzzed again. It was still my mom's relentless voice messages, each more urgent than the last. She dared not post in the group, only bombarding me with private messages. But now her fear was genuine, nearly crying and shouting, "Emma, forget the food. Come back and get us. The 1st floor is completely flooded, and the roofs are about to blow off. The house is leaking everywhere. There's almost nowhere to stay, Emma. What do? Your 4th brother's arm was smashed by a falling fan. We need to get to the hospital, but we're too scared to go out. Come get him to the hospital. We can't just let him be crippled." I thought sarcastically, "What's stopping you? When I was swept away by the typhoon before, did he do anything back then?" I ignored her. Even without seeing it firsthand, my room's windows were shaking constantly. It wasn't hard to imagine how dire the situation was there. "Emma, are you coming to get us or not?" A fine way to raise an ungrateful child. Are you just going to leave your family to die while you're safe? My dad finally couldn't help but jump into the chaos, disappointed. Well, I intend to make them even more desperate. I casually sent a location near my home and replied, "On my way, almost there." My mom responded instantly, "Okay, Emma, just get here soon. The roof of the top floor has flown off. A bunch of branches flew inside. Lucas got hurt. Hurry back so we can take him to the hospital." Meanwhile, I nonchalantly ate a kiwi. I could hear Lucas crying loudly in the background through her voice message. Then my sister-in-law's unexpected shout came through, "Mom, the balconies are down too." My mom's voice message abruptly stopped. I glanced at the time. The complete collapse of the house was supposed to happen around now. The foundation and load-bearing walls must be near their limits, and the walls were probably cracking and leaning. I wondered if those 4 brothers of the 5-son success plan were still contemplating getting that $1 million from me. Just as I thought they wouldn't bother me anymore, my mom video called me in a panic. Surprisingly, she managed to connect despite the unstable signal. This time, I answered without hesitation. Time to show them my situation, or else they'd be clueless even if they died. Emma, didn't you say you were almost here? Why haven't you come yet? Your 3rd sister-in-law is in labor too? Our house is shaking. Did you see it? Will it collapse? Are we going to die? My mom shouted hysterically, tears streaming down her face, not even paying attention to me. The signal was weak, but my 2nd and 3rd sister-in-laws began to see my surroundings clearly and became furious. Emma, you're not coming to take us, are you? Mom, look at her. She's sitting in a nice, fancy safe room. Doesn't look like there's a typhoon at all. I denied it. How could it be safe here? Even my glass windows are shaking. Oh, by the way, my power's out too. Didn't you notice it got darker? I'm quite happy with the hotel I chose. It feels very safe overall. Oh, and Buddy is here too. Say hi to everyone, Buddy. Buddy. I picked him up and looked at the camera. Emma, how can you still laugh? Are you even human? You're treating a dead dog better than us. Isn't your heart cold? My dad yelled, his voice breaking. Who else should I treat well if not Buddy? You all know in this family who has treated me with the most sincerity. When you kicked me out during the typhoon, did you even consider your humanity? I coldly responded, but words don't faze thick-skinned people. My sister-in-laws were furious. My dad angrily stated, Emma, I don't care what you did before. Get here now or I won't have you as a daughter. Fine, I've played the Williams daughter role long enough. Whoever wants to be can find any of your sons. Each is capable enough. The camera quivered violently as my mother's terrified expression loomed closer. What about us? Are you just going to watch us perish, Emma? How can you be so cruel? You'll end up in hell for not helping your own mother. I couldn't help but laugh. Didn't Dad say that life and death are determined by fate? That fortune and misfortune are beyond our control? You always claim that grass cannot mend walls, and a daughter cannot support her mother. I'm just a girl. What can I possibly do? No one disturbed me anymore, and as the video concluded, a loud crash followed by agonizing screams reached my ears. I assumed the house had collapsed. I switched to airplane mode, choosing to ignore their turmoil until the typhoon had passed. Holding Buddy, I stared blankly at the violent storm outside. An entire day and night went by before the most severe part of the super typhoon subsided. However, floods, building collapses, and accidents were rampant, making it impossible to leave. Many old trees were uprooted, homes and public structures were destroyed, and water and power outages persisted for 3 days. Countless people lost their livelihoods, family members, and comfortable homes overnight due to the disaster. Nature's might reminded me of how insignificant we humans are. I felt fortunate to survive, considering winning the lottery was more than enough. I intended to assist those in need as much as possible. 3 days later, once it was safe to venture out, I left the hotel to retrieve some clothes from my school dorm. I planned to manage family matters after being notified by the police. However, just as I was leaving, I received a call from the hospital informing me that my relatives were being treated at the city hospital and that I should hurry over. Although skeptical, I went to the hospital to verify. Upon arriving at the emergency room, the cries of my mother and eldest sister-in-law echoed through the hallway, causing my heart to drop. Maybe the house hadn't actually collapsed. I waited for a moment before approaching. It was indeed my mother and sister-in-law, along with a boy who might have been Noah. They looked terrible. Disheveled hair, torn clothes, and visible injuries. My mother noticed me, stared for a moment, then rushed over, seemingly intending to slap me. She had forgotten that her right arm was in a cast. Raising her hand only worsened her injury, causing her to scream. My eldest sister-in-law spat at me. "Emma, you heartless person! How dare you show your face? Did a dog eat your conscience?" My mother found solace and sat on the floor in the bustling hospital hallway, crying out, "How unlucky I am to have raised an ungrateful child for 25 years. When the typhoon hit, she abandoned the family and drove off to a fancy hotel, caring nothing for those at home. Oh man, I've been devastated. I lost 3 out of 4 sons, and the one left has a broken hand. My daughter-in-law and my chubby grandchild are gone too, and another daughter-in-law who was 5 months pregnant miscarried. Oh, and their grandmother was swept away by the flood. My husband's legs were crushed by a wall, and now he's paralyzed. I deeply regret raising a jinx, a total disaster. It feels like the world is so unfair. Why didn't you die? People passing by stopped, shocked by what they heard. The first sentence was bad enough, but there were so many more, each about losing someone. It's probably one of the saddest stories in the entire disaster area. Onlookers watched her with sympathy, and a few women attempted to help her up. However, when they looked at me, their eyes were filled with disdain and even disgust. After her tirade, I had a clear understanding. It seemed my parents, sister-in-law, brother, and even Noah had survived but were severely injured. I watched her without showing any emotion as she berated me for my supposed sins. The doctors wanted her to refrain from yelling outside the emergency room, but seeing how distressed she was, they only tried to calm her gently. In that moment, I felt like the worst person alive, as if I had destroyed my entire family. I couldn't hold back and loudly demanded, "Can I ask everyone? Does the typhoon listen to me? Did my house collapse and kill my family because I asked the typhoon to do it? My mom keeps saying it's my fault they died, but is it because I died? You all planned to kick me out before the typhoon, right? You said you were afraid there wouldn't be enough food and water during the storm and didn't want to take care of me, right? I didn't want to burden you, so I left on my own." People around began questioning her accusations. "Come on, how could a young girl like me cause so much destruction?" My sister-in-law angrily pointed at me. "So you admit you were lying to us the whole time? You were safe from the start, right? You tricked us into driving back to get us. If you hadn't lied, we would have already—" I interrupted her. "We would have escaped. You knew how bad the typhoon was. There was no way you could drive. Yet you kept asking me to send food and power banks to take others to the hospital. What was your real intention? And can you honestly say you weren't hoping I wouldn't come back?" She was speechless, just mumbling to herself. The crowd began murmuring, "You can't blame a natural disaster on a single person. In bad weather, everyone just wants to survive. Asking one girl to save an entire family is too much. It doesn't work that way. Blame it on bad luck." Just then, the emergency room doors opened, and a doctor emerged with a grim expression. "I'm sorry we couldn't save the patient's legs. They had to be amputated." Another doctor followed. "I'm sorry we couldn't save the patient's arms either. They had to be amputated. It's been 2 or 3 days already, so keeping the limbs was unlikely." My mother heard this news and fainted. The doctors rushed to assist her. My sister-in-law came over angrily, telling me to leave. Unfazed, I turned to go. Then a nurse, unaware of what had just transpired, asked for the hospital fees. My sister-in-law was furious. "Don't you have any decency? When our family suffered so much and you're asking for money? The typhoon wrecked our house. Where are we supposed to find the cash?" She pointed at me just as the elevator doors closed. By the time she realized and tried to catch up, I was already in the parking lot. "They'll have to figure out the money themselves. I've advised them so many times to get medical insurance, but they wouldn't listen. Instead, they preferred gambling, hoping to strike it, buddy." I decided to sever ties with them, blocking everyone. I went to the store, bought a few inconspicuous outfits, and discreetly cashed in my lottery ticket once the office reopened. I donated $500,000 to support girls in rural areas and another $1 million in supplies to the hardest-hit disaster zones. With the remaining funds, I didn't plan on buying a house since prices were dropping. Instead, I considered studying abroad in a major I genuinely enjoyed. I might not return. Eventually, I'd find a place with a good climate and settle there. Managing my own finances now meant I didn't have to worry about greedy relatives benefiting from my luck. In my previous life, when I discovered I'd won the lottery, I wanted to share the good news with my mother. But knowing her favoritism, I didn't tell her the truth. I jokingly asked what she would do if I won $100,000. She seriously replied, "It should be split 5 ways, with Mom and Dad getting a share and one for each brother's family." I was shocked and asked, "What about me? I won it." Without hesitation, she responded, "The family raised you all this time. Your little salary was hardly enough to repay the favor. Your brothers are the ones working at home and will be looking after us old folks. You, being a daughter, won't be here for us when you get married. So, before that happens, you should do more for the family." Her words left me speechless, convincing me not to inform her about the win. A few days later, my mother and sister-in-law couldn't pay the medical bills and came to my school for money. But I had already resigned after claiming my prize. Working locally after graduation was their choice, not mine. It had nothing to do with my interests or dreams. Unable to find me, they resorted to calling the police. When the cops arrived, I was renting a nice furnished apartment and studying. My mother, sister-in-law, Noah, my brother, my grandpa, and another sister-in-law, all of them, appeared at my place. When I opened the door, they looked more shocked than I was. Seeing the fancy apartment, their eyes gleamed with greed. Even though my dad was in a wheelchair, he still had that strong-willed father demeanor. Naturally, he was the first to lose his composure and exclaimed, "Emma, are you even human? When disaster hit, you ran off to have a good time, and now the family's all broken, some dead, some crippled. We can't even afford medical bills, and you just abandon your family to live it up. You're worse than an animal." My mom angrily chimed in, "Stop the nonsense. People like her have no conscience. Give the hospital the 20 grand for medical bills, then go meet that widower in town. He lost his wife to the flood a few days ago, and the dowry is 50 grand. Otherwise, the police will take you to jail." The officer intervened. "Watch your language. Whether she goes to jail is not up to me, but the law. You reported her missing. Now she's found." Let's talk it out. Abandoning family sounds like something from a short video. Maybe it's abandonment? My third sister-in-law paused the recording and stepped forward. "Sis, looks like you're living real nicely now. If you had told us you were being kept, we all could have enjoyed this too. Mom, think about it. This house is worth over $3 million, and you're just asking for 50 grand. The first sister-in-law had an epiphany and quickly added, "Right, at least 3 million. Now the family can't work. Noah's brain injury needs cash for treatment. We can't let her off easily." I rolled my eyes. "Am I your father or your mother? Whoever birthed you should be responsible. Officer, legally, my only obligation is to support them after they turn 60. But don't worry, I'll pay exactly what the law requires when the time comes." The police noted everything, mediating the domestic dispute. As they tried to argue further, I blocked the door. Security arrived shortly after since I had called them earlier. "The property here's great. They kicked my family out. I even asked them to keep non-residents out for good." As they left, they cursed my entire family. "I bet they've truly lost their marbles. You'd need some sanity to curse your own family." But I underestimated how far they'd go. They started a live stream to raise money, portraying me as the ungrateful daughter. Given the severe typhoon disaster, their sob story quickly garnered public sympathy. A family of older, sick individuals streaming live gained immense support overnight, receiving numerous sympathy gifts. The media covered it extensively. My family became arrogant, escalating their accusations and playing the family love card, fearing my retaliation. They realized that forgiving me wouldn't be as profitable as the endless generosity of strangers they were after. It was better if the drama continued and the money kept flowing in. A daughter isn't filial. It's our fault. We spoiled her. We're this way now, so her leaving is understandable. The family was hit by nature and man's cruelty, but if she returns, well, forgive her. Sis, as a woman too, I say it's good to have a family behind you. Visit us if you can." This disguised plea for sympathy drew in older folks' pity and increased the hatred towards me. Even neighbors pointed fingers. Seeing no response from me, my family became more outrageous. On a record-breaking day for them, I created my own account to debunk their lies. No long speeches, just the full story of that typhoon day. The clincher was the surveillance footage from my phone showing my family planning to kick me out to marry me off even during the storm. Suddenly, public opinion shifted. Everyone was stunned by their moral downfall. Comments surged, demanding the return of gifts. My family resisted, but the video was irrefutable. Before they could devise a new plan, the platform shut them down, returning any withdrawn gifts. They also had to refund the spent ones. With nowhere else to go, they retreated to my grandpa's old house in the countryside, facing local scorn. My dad and grandfather, used to being prominent figures, struggled with the shame, venting their frustrations on my mother and sister-in-law. The first sister-in-law managed okay with Noah, but the third sister-in-law was blamed for bringing up the marriage plot and leaving evidence. Frustrated, she tried to sneak away one night but got into an accident and died instantly. My parents didn't hesitate to marry her off posthumously for the dowry. When her family discovered this, they trashed my grandpa's place, and he had a heart attack and died. None of this affected my studies or job applications. With good security at my residence, I remained undisturbed. There was just one hiccup. My aunt was out walking the dog when my brother stole Buddy, my dog, and called demanding $3 million, or else. He knew how much Buddy meant to me, more than even my own relatives. But I'm no fool. I called the police. Since the ransom was too high, he was locked up. In the end, I got into my dream school. With the lottery winnings, I could finish my studies and settle somewhere nice. So, my mother, although she fortunately escaped the collapsed house, has led a visibly exhausting life. She had to care for my dad, who was paralyzed from the waist down, look after her awkwardly dull grandson, and later, her fourth son who was released from prison. I don't know if she ever regrets it. After all, she chose her path. The people she cares for are the men she cherishes the most. One day, my donation was featured in the news. Even though my face was blurred, my mother recognized me immediately. She somehow obtained my phone number from a friend. My parents called, crying and questioning why I didn't help the family after winning such a large lottery. My mother asked me to come home when I had the chance, saying she'd treat everyone fairly now and wouldn't play favorites anymore. I simply asked her, "Which home? The one where all I got was a storage room in that 5-story house?" She remained silent after that. Later, I went abroad to study with Buddy. I even renamed him Lucky and gave myself a new name too, Fly. I'm no longer in debt to anyone. I'm going to soar freely and ride the winds.